All right, good afternoon or good morning if you're watching the recording. Today we'll be talking about how to build and scale up a data science and analytics organization. Now, that's a pretty large topic by itself, but we'll unpack what that means throughout the presentation. So my name is Jacky Zhao, and I'm the Director of Data Science and Analytics here at Truckstop.com. And let's get started. All right, so just a little bit about myself. I've been with Truckstop.com for almost 2 years now. In fact, yesterday was I believe, the 2-year anniversary. Truckstop is a SaaS company, and we have just over 600 employees, but we are actually expanding really fast, so we're always hiring. I'm based out in the windy city of Chicago, but I've spent many years in New York City and Austin, Texas. When I was brought in to Truckstop, I was really tasked with building out the data science and analytics organization from the ground up, right? Having that culture come in. I started the data science team with a team of 1, and we've grown to a team of 10. And like I said, we are still hiring. My background is sort of all over the place. Prior to Truckstop, I've held roles in machine learning, statistics, software development, and industrial engineering at large enterprise companies and medium companies alike, such as Accenture, Samsung, Coyote Logistics. Got my bachelor's in industrial engineering and operations research at the University of Michigan, and I got my master's in data science at the University of Missouri. Also, I currently sit on the Data Science Advisory Board at the University of Missouri, where I provide guidance and consultation on their graduate program to make sure and ensure that the curriculum is relevant to some of the real-world challenges that we're facing today. All right, so what's on the agenda today? All right, so we're going to talk about an overview about Truckstop.com, right, and how exactly we're leveraging machine learning in the freight logistics space. Next, we'll pivot over to sort of how we got there, our journey to get to where we are today. And if you're planning to start a data team at your company, what are the few things that you should look out for, and what are the few things that you should cross off your list? Right. So this includes things like the needs of the company, assessing the needs of the company, knowing the different verticals in which you can support your business, what to look for when you're hiring a data scientist, and lastly, how to structure a business intelligence squad. Right. So first of all, what is Truckstop.com and what is it that we do? Truckstop.com is a digital marketplace for freight. So in other words, we connect the people who have freight to move with the people who are looking to move freight. So you got your brokers and you got your carriers. Right? The carriers are just truck drivers. And traditionally, freight logistics is it's a very old industry. It's a very traditional industry, but it's one where it's ripe for disruption. Right? And along the years, Truckstop has grown to pretty much own the entire life cycle of freight logistics. So that means that our customers can post a load to move if they're a broker. They can look for a load to move if they're a truck driver or a carrier, understand the marketplace to ensure that you're paying the right cost to move the freight, or you're earning the right income by moving the freight. And also, we allow carriers to book loads automatically without having to pick up the phone, right? We allow them to track the loads via our mobile app, submit paperwork electronically, and process payments instantaneously, right? So we brought the digitalization into an otherwise traditional freight logistics industry. So freight is complex, and oftentimes it's still very manual. It's unpredictable, and it's subject to so many different factors, right? And we've already seen the effects of a fragile supply chain during the pandemic. We've seen it again during the Texas outage. And more recently, we saw it during the Suez Canal blockage, right? And because there's so much uncertainty, we use data to empower our brokers and carriers so that they can make smarter decisions. And here's just one example of it. The cost of moving freight changes every day, right? That's called the rate, right? And that's mostly due to the supply and demand, right? If there are a lot of truck drivers in a given area, the cost to move the load goes down, right? There's more options to work with. But if there are very few truck drivers in a given area, it drives the cost up. You have a higher demand than your supply. Right? So anytime there's an imbalance in the supply chain, you'll see fluctuations in the price. Right? So traditionally, our customers have been estimated the costs. They've been estimating the cost and the rate by averaging out what a 7-day average looks like on a given lane. So what was the last 7 days from Chicago going to Atlanta? Right? And I would argue actually that the traditional way, it does a pretty decent job. But when I joined the team, when I joined Truckstop, I realized right away that we needed to be more granular. We needed to be very specific in our rates forecasting. So with machine learning, we're actually starting from the bottom up, right? We're being what we call hyper granular. And through our research, we've identified key data sets and load attributes to train our model. So we're incorporating things like capacity, how many available trucks are in a given area, the demand, how many loads need to be covered and moved, the weather, because that impacts driving conditions, the freight attribute itself, is it soda? Is it really heavy? When is the pickup? When is the drop off, for example? And also the geopolitical environment, right? So the economics of it all. But above all else, we also layer in geospatial and temporal techniques because we realize that those are really the biggest movers in predicting the rate. Right? So our models are retrained 3 times a day to account for any sudden changes in the market. And through many months of trial and error, we've been consistently achieving single-digit percentages on average for the margin of error. So how were we able to do this? Well, we're able to get hyper granular because of the massive amount of data that flow through our systems. And I can tell you that we have millions of loads posted on our platform every day, but I much rather show you. Right? So in just 1 hour, here's a snapshot of all the loads that were posted on our platform across the US. So the key takeaway really is if you want an accurate model, you should have a lot of good quality training data. And the fact is, machine learning is difficult. Right? And the dirty little secret in the industry is the modeling is not the hardest part. Right? Really, the hardest part is being able to get to a production-ready machine learning solution. And those of you who are trying to do machine learning at your companies, they can probably attest to that. Right? But don't take my word for it. A Gartner survey revealed that 20% of C-level executives reported having machine learning only successfully deployed into production, whereas 80% that they're still developing or contemplating the use of ML. Whereas the McKinsey survey reported that 88% of AI projects do not go beyond the experimental stage. And the reason why machine learning is so hard is because it requires significant investments in machine learning statistics, software development, data engineering, DevOps and machine learning ops, ML ops, and lastly, information security. Right? And also, on top of it all, you need to find a leader who's able to dabble in each of those function areas. They don't need to be experts, but they need to at least have a working knowledge, and those are hard to find. All right, so machine learning is hard. So do companies need to have machine learning or a data science team, right? I would argue no, right? So how would some companies overcome this? Right, this is where APIs come in. So what we're doing is we're deploying something called machine learning as a service, where it's simply a suite of API endpoints that encapsulates the complexities of machine learning. And most of the time, you could probably find companies that can that can offer the same thing in your industry, right? These APIs abstract away all the research time, the development time, deployment, maintenance, and support. So by having API endpoints, you can take advantage of predictive capabilities without a lot of the upfront cost, investment, and ownership. Right? So now that I've gone over sort of where we are today as a company and some of the things that we've been doing with machine learning and some of the alternatives that you see in the industry, let's talk about the journey there. So suppose you're planning to start a company, start a data team at your company. What are the few things to look out for, and what are the few things to cross off your list? The sad reality is that not every company needs a data science team. Right? Executives will sometimes hear about machine learning and how it can change the world, and the hype is definitely there. But if the company is not quite ready for machine learning, you may be setting yourself up for failure. So before you jump in headfirst and start hiring your first data scientist, you should really ask yourself these questions, right? Does leadership value data? is there a culture of data-driven decision making, or do the executives tend to go with their tribal knowledge, right? Their gut instincts, so to speak. Because if the answer is no, right, if they don't have a culture of data decision making, you have a lot of convincing to do. So it's a long road to success. But if the answer is yes, then you need to ask if the company even has a lot of data to work with. Because everybody thinks that they have a lot of data, but how much of it is truly relevant? How much of it is clean? And how much of it is trustworthy data? Because after all, garbage in is garbage out. So pretend that you do have a lot of data, you do have a lot of good data. What does that data pipeline then look like? How is the data collected? How is it being harvested? Is the data in a different dozens of different databases, or is it organized really well in a central data warehouse? Right? Because if the answer is no to any of those questions, you may actually want to start off building out a data engineering team first and establishing proper data governance. Right? You may be putting the cart before the horse by starting out with a data science team right off the bat. Right? So in addition, who decides what data to collect? So product telemetry needs to be a strategic initiative in this day and age. So let's pretend for now that there's proper leadership in place. There's a culture that values data. There's a lot of good, clean data to work with. And then there's a robust data pipeline. So what projects will you be working on? What are the top 3 problems that the business needs you to solve? Right? Are they internal back office problems, or are you looking to provide a customer-facing solution? So I really want you to spend a lot of time on this step, because solving for back office problems, it can give you the quick win that you need to help your team gain credibility. Whereas building a customer-facing solution, while it may yield greater returns, you're spending a lot of time getting your models into a production-ready state, and sometimes you just may run out of funding, right? So sometimes you just want to show value right away for the rest of the company. And lastly, do you even need a data science team, or will a business intelligence team suffice? Right? Do you need the visibility of your data through dashboards, or are you looking to leverage predictive capabilities? Right? So let's talk about data verticals. So my team, it organically splits into 2 buckets. Your first is product development, and this is where data scientists mostly reside. My data scientists are categorized as either quants or engineering, so more on that in the next slide. But in product development, we work very closely with product managers to identify customer issues, and we translate that into machine learning problems, right? Machine learning solutions. And to promote a culture of learning, data scientists are encouraged to regularly publish blog posts for our internal stakeholders, because it's important to showcase what we can do. The other side of the house is business intelligence. And that's where the data analysts reside. So we follow the center of excellence structure, which I'll talk about later. And we work very closely with the internal business functional areas to provide visibility into the data through dashboards and reporting. When you're ready to hire your data scientists, please do not look for a unicorn. All right? They do not exist. And if they do, if you happen to stumble upon one, you're going to be paying a lot of money for them. I had to learn that the hard way. So there's really only 8 working hours in a day, and it's better if you hire a healthy balance of data scientists so they can split the work and learn from one another. At the highest level, there are 2 types of data scientists. Your type A, which stands for analysis, and type B, which stands for building. Your type A folks are more quantitative. They typically have a stronger background in math and stats, and they typically are experts in experimental design, machine learning, statistical analysis, whereas your type B folks are more engineering focused. They typically have a stronger background in computer science and engineering. Right? They're experts in building out robust ML pipelines, leveraging Kubernetes, Docker, knowing what CI/CD is, and Kubeflow. Right? But above all else, both your type A and type B scientists need to be strong communicators and storytellers, because it doesn't matter how smart you are if you cannot convey your insights to the business. I'm going to go pretty fast here because we're running out of time. And lastly, let's talk about the different structures of a business intelligence squad. Most companies, they tend to follow one of 3 structures. You got your centralized structure, your distributor structure, and your center of excellence structure. Let's start with the centralized structure first. Centralized is basically a central analytics group where request sort of comes in on a first come, first serve basis. So whoever is free and has bandwidth will work on those requests. And the beauty of that setup is that the team internally has a very strong sense of identity and cohesion, right? They're growing together. But the problem with the centralized structure is that the business they may not be getting the optimal value, right? Because one day marketing could be working with Stacy, and then the next day marketing will be working with Bob. The analysts, they're simply fulfilling requests at this point, and it's sort of a factory, right? They're not really solving towards a larger problem in the business. Whereas the distributed structure, it's the opposite problem, right? You have your analysts in each department, and they report up to that department. So for example, Jennifer, she is the marketing data analyst, and nobody at the company knows more about marketing data than Jennifer. And that's because she's so integrated fully into the marketing business. And that's good, right? But the downside here is that Jennifer really isn't growing her data career, right? That's because her peers are not data folks. Her peers are marketing folks. And because of that, there's no standards, there's no code review or peer review, and then lastly, there's no sharing of best practices. So what happens is this often leads to a lack of career growth and high turnover, right? What we chose to do, right, we learned from both the centralized and the distributed structure, and what we chose to do was we adopted the center of excellence structure. Now, it's simply a hybrid of centralized and distributed structure, where there's still a central analytics group, but now we're simply embedding the analysts into functional areas for what we call tours of duty. Right? So now Billy is accountable to the broader organization, but he still has a structured home base where he can do code reviews, he can share best practices with other data analysts, attend the same stand-ups, and then above all else, still be able to grow his career. Right? So I want you to really think about this, right? If you have a business intelligence team already, or if you're starting one up, think about how it's structured today or how you want it to be structured. Right? How does it currently perform? Is it really meeting the needs of the business, or is there an opportunity to do more? All right, so we're nearing the end. I just want to quickly thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and if you have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. If we run out of time and I don't get to your question, again, please reach out. My email and LinkedIn are listed here, and I'll go ahead and check on the chat. Do I have a preference on the structure? Yes, Center of Excellence is what we've adopted, and it's worked really well so far. And the beauty of that is we're able to then say if Stacy is overworked with marketing requests, but Ben here on the customer success side has a little bit of a free time. Ben and Stacy, because they're on the same team, they can leverage the work with one another, and they can share that, and Stacy can offload some of that workload, right? And in addition, if Stacy is sick and tired of marketing and she wants to look at, I don't know, finance, for example, or product data, then we can work on a transition plan there, right? But because of that flexibility and because they're sort of embedded in what we call tours of duty, they're able to leverage one another. Right? It's similar to, I would say, similar to studying abroad. You have your foster family, you're breaking bread with them, you're eating dinner with them. Their problems are your problems, but then you have your home base, right? You have your home university back in the States. Hope I answered that, Brandy. That's a good question. All right. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.